Welcome, Danbury, Bethel, and Richfield, to tonight's Chris Ponte Show for today, April the 28th, 2015. I'm Chris Ponte, and my guest tonight is Karen Udis. You remember, Karen is a lawyer from the World Bank that did a great interview with me this past January, 3-4 months ago, and a lot of things are happening in the financial world. I reached out to Karen, and she was gracious enough to come up here from Washington, D.C. to appear on the show. So first off, Karen, thank you so very much.
Thanks for having me on again, Chris.
This is awesome. You know, coming off that first interview, I got a lot of great feedback, number one, because you dropped some real education on the people that were able to watch it. And people had questions about a couple of key things that they got from that interview. So I figured maybe we should start off by talking about some of those things, if that works for you. Everybody in the world has a bank card, and it works like no one's business because you can go to the ATM, you can get your money out, and everybody's happy. But something happens when you sign the back of your bank card. Let's talk about that. What actually occurs when a person signs the back of their bank card?
That's when you have something called contracts of adhesion. That's a fancy word for saying a contract that you had no choice to agree to or not. There's a fellow, Chris Mercier, who used to be the clerk of the courts in New York. And in 1985, he wrote a book about hidden contracts, that when you sign your signature card, on the very bottom, in very fine print, it says subject to bank rules. And if you look to see what those bank rules are, there's a hidden contract in there that says that you agree that you are not going to go to a regular court that you're supposed to be entitled to go to under the Constitution. Instead, you're going to go to an administrative court. And those judges who are sitting up there as if they were actually federal judges are in reality in a secret administrative court. And they are not looking at you as if you were entitled to your rights under the Constitution.
Okay, now my question is, would these be courts where you would bring matters against just financial institutions, or am I going to a court if I was charged criminally with something, provided I had signed the back of that bank card? Does that mean I am not in the real court, even if it wasn't a financial issue that I was in the court for?
That's right. You are not in a real criminal court. All of the courts are administrative courts.
Wow.
And I went to the Senate Judiciary Committee, and I tried to get them to own up to this fact. But if the Congress is not going to admit that they have been declaring a state of emergency every single year since 1861, and if they're not telling the American people that they're secretly under martial law, do you think they were going to admit to the fact that citizens are not going to courts of equity?
Right. Hook me up here on camera one if you can, Mike. I want people, I did not say this in the open. The phone number is 203-792-4101. We're going to be talking about things that affect the everyday person. The phone is hooked up and ready to go. And if you hear anything that we're talking about, any matter that you want clarification of or proof of, give a call and Karen will address it that way. Now, you mentioned the bank card. So just by doing that, you essentially forfeit your rights that we think we have under the Constitution. The Constitution evidently isn't really the one that we think we have, is it?
That's right. In 1871, the banks incorporated the United States and called the United States a corporation. And when they created the District of Columbia, what they did was they put that corporation in the District of Columbia. And they said that the members of Congress were actually managers of that corporation. And they said the President of the United States was actually the president of that corporation. So we're not living in the country that we think we're living in. And what I've actually done is I have said that we are under something called state capture. And I have said that there is an interregnum. And if you look that word up, that means that we don't have a legitimate government. And when the founding fathers wrote this Constitution, they realized that the bankers were trying to pull a fast one on us and to try to take over our governance. And so they put in a safety mechanism, and there's something called Article 5, which says that when 2/3 of the state legislatures request an amendment, that the Congress is required to convene a constitution to consider amendments. And the Congress was supposed to do that back in 1929. They've been in contempt of the American people. They haven't given us the opportunity to get our original Constitution back. They haven't even told us that we are not operating under our original Constitution. They've been lying to us.
You know, we were talking before the show, and one of the things we discussed, because I asked you, you know, we send people to the Congress and we send people to the Senate, but it's immaterial who we send, isn't it? I mean, they're totally controlled. They do the bidding of a whole other master.
That's right.
Correct?
That's right. And so we are under something called state capture, which is that our public officials are actually serving the interests of the bankers. They're not serving the interests of their constituents.
You know, every day we open up our wallets and we see a Federal Reserve note, and it's legal tender for debts. I would say 90% of the country, if they even recognize the word Federal Reserve, have no idea how they got into this country. Why don't you tell our listeners who these people really are and how they got here?
The Federal Reserve is a private institution. It's not a government organization. And they're actually part of something called the Network of Global Corporate Control. 3 mathematicians did a study of who owns all of the 43,000 companies on the world's capital markets. What they found out is that one company has put directors in interlocking boards in a kind of, it's a Ponzi scheme. So they have actually 10 times the economic might that they're supposed to have because of the clever way that they did this. They didn't think that we would find this out, but we did. And so this company has 60% of the profits. They are in control of 40% of the assets of the 43,000 companies on the capital markets. And in the meantime, they bought up all of the media, and they're censoring the media. What they're telling people is their version of what they think people need to know. They're censoring information that people, if they knew about it, would think they were entitled to know.
You know, it's interesting. Every time we look at our Social Security card and our driver's license, we see our name in bold print, big block letters. I've been writing my own name for 52 years, and I've never wrote it the way the Social Security card or my license has it written. What is the significance of the big block letters?
The significance is that they have actually created miniature companies for each citizen. They have said that we are actually companies. We're not real people. And they treat us as if we were those companies. When we go into a court, we're not seen by the judges there as if we're human beings. We're seen as if we're representatives of that corporation in our name. And when they take the birth certificates, they bundle them together and they pledge them on the capital markets, and they earn money on them. They calculate how many taxes we're going to pay over our lifetime, and then they issue a bond in that value, and they earn money on that bond.
So we're cattle. We were deemed that we're prizes for other people. We're not real people. We've already been bought and sold. By the time we enter in the world, we have the Social Security number. We are already into that system. And when we sign the bank card, we lose our rights. That's what it sounds like to me. It's like a depreciation of humanity. You enter this world, and it just rolls right down. The system is meant to control you, and from what you're saying, own you. It's
when you realize how this could have come into effect. It's a betrayal of the most fundamental way. And part of the question that you have when you hear about this is you say, how many people have been working on this and making it this way? And who's been doing this? Who's been betraying us? And one of the main culprits is the legal profession.
Talk to me about that. Talk to me about that.
Yes, the American Bar Association has been betraying people. They've been creating a very complex system without telling people about it. And when people go to law school, they're never taught about this. But fortunately, there are some very clever people who have been studying this and teaching this to other people. And when you finally find out about this, you can find the evidence for it. You can see the statutes as they've been enacted. For example, the Social Security Act, that's in the United Kingdom. The reason why is when we pay our taxes, they're actually going out of the country. Our income taxes, 100% of them are leaving the country. Ronald Reagan had a Grace Commission do a study of where our tax revenues were going, and he found out, the Grace Commission did a report and found out that the income taxes were all going to the bankers, foreign bankers outside the country.
So what we all just did before April 15th, and we're told, okay, you owe the federal government $300. You owe the state government $112, yada, yada, yada. You write checks, and it never ends up to the place that we sent it to. That all this money is just siphoned to the bankers.
Well, you know, what they did with the states was they incorporated the states as well. And then they created something called Metro 1313. They have special agencies that, on the face of it, look as if they're helpful. The National Association of State Legislatures, there's a whole slew of these organizations. They're actually there to undermine the states. I think it's 10 states in their constitutions no longer recognize their own boundaries. Their agenda was to erase the states and to put them in the 10 FEMA regions. So we were going to have a different kind of a governance than we thought we had.
Is this state of emergency that you say we've been in since, was it 1871, you said?
It was 1861 that we started on the state of emergency.
Is the end result of that martial law?
Yes, we are under martial law.
Just by having that state of emergency?
That's what that's designed to do, yes. Keep us under martial law.
Which means that when we are located in one of the 10 FEMA regions, I know that F stands for federal, and that's never good. Correct?
Federal Emergency Management Act. That's
which means that it can become even more martial than it is. If something ever broke out in FEMA Region 2, the military would be at the president's disposal to create a, let's call, lasting peace. Now, couldn't they? Does the military work for us or for them?
Well, I can tell you actually what's been going on with the military, because when former Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel was still senator of Nebraska, I was talking to him about a very powerful analytic tool called a power transition model that was developed in the Department of Defense by Jacek Kugler, who is a political scientist, who was the chair of the political science department at Claremont University in California. And what this model does is it predicts how coalitions will form. It's 90 to 95% accurate. They've been looking at it over, I think, 300 or 400 models, maybe more now. But what this predicts is how coalitions will interact with each other using game theory modeling. And what the power transition model predicted was that there would be a coalition for the rule of law that would counteract the corruption of these banks. And I spoke to Senator Hagel about this model back in 2008. And then when he became Secretary of Defense, I kept writing to him about it because it predicted that the United States was going to lose its allies. And that's what's actually happened. That's why Germany is now joining the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. This model predicted that if the United States did not start acting like a country, defending its own interests, if it wouldn't end the state capture of the banking institutions, that we were going to be isolated. And that's actually what the risk is, except that we've been forming a coalition to fight those bankers. And that coalition now exists, and that coalition has actually placed the Federal Reserve and the rest of these private central banks into receivership, because it turns out that those banks owe us more than we owe them under our country debt.
And where does that stand? Are we going to get what we deserve to get from them, or is this going to be in the courts and litigated forever and ever and ever before they have to turn over the resources, the things that they owe us?
It's not going to be in the courts because let's step back a little bit and figure out how it is that these banks owe us more than we owe them. And that's because underneath all of this paper currency, which is just, it's paper, it's not, the only reason the Federal Reserve notes are valuable is because we in the United States are willing to pay taxes to back up these Federal Reserve notes. It's because we recognize them. But when you understand what they actually are, we shouldn't be recognizing them. We should have our own honest constitutional money because the Federal Reserve note is unconstitutional.
Correct.
We were never supposed to have paper currencies like this. We were supposed to have currencies issued by the Congress.
Correct.
Based on precious metals, based on silver, based on gold. And instead, we have paper currency, which in 1971 became detached from the gold. That was when Nixon
Nixon did that.
Yes. And the reason that Nixon did that was because we had the war in Vietnam, and there was all this debt that was piling up, and there was no way that we had enough gold to compensate people.
Caller, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
You're on with Karen Udis, and ask away.
I feel I'm in a graduate course. I'm almost taking notes as I listen. I'm finding this extremely interesting. But let me make it simple for a minute so I can understand. When Karen says bank card, do you mean credit card? What? I just want some clarification, and then I have another question.
Is it an ATM card? Is it a credit card? Or is it all of the cards?
I'm simply talking about the bank signature card. They want you to give a specimen signature. It may very well be the credit cards, but I don't know that for a fact. I'm basing this on what George Mercier wrote.
Okay, so it's not something. I'm thrilled at what's going on and while I'm watching. I think I should get a certificate of merit because the information is, we don't hear this. And they don't want us to hear it. Trust me. But before, Chris, I thank you. And I want to say I missed your show a couple weeks ago when you were actually a little bit live.
Oh, okay.
And so welcome back, because I wanted to just missed you on your live shows.
Thank you very much, and we'll be here for the next, 2 months on Tuesday. So by the end of June, you'll be quite sick of me.
No. Not if you keep the quality of guests. And as I said, I feel like I'm earning a graduate degree.
Awesome.
So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And there it is. You know, people just are absolutely amazed. Okay, this is kind of a prelude, going back to the original interview we did in January. But as we move it into today, April 28th, there's a lot of discussion about a global currency reset. You just mentioned before that the world is filled with this paper money, right? It could be the yen or the dinar or the won, whatever it is, the dollar. And there's always this battle, well, what's one worth versus another one, bingo, bango, bungo. And it seems like they're going to try to put this right under a big dome. So why don't you, let's talk about what exactly the global currency reset threatens to be and what it may actually turn out to be.
Okay, let's go back and finish the question about the U.S. military.
Okay.
And where does the military stand in this? Mm-hmm. Because that's actually the very crux of the global currency reset. Okay. And this is also why I'm very convinced that it's not going to be chaotic. It's going to be very smooth. It's going to be a wonderful transition. And this is because the military understands that the United States should not surrender unilaterally. And if the Federal Reserve note is worthless, then how are they going to pay their troops? If there's nothing backing the Federal Reserve note, but our thought that the American people are willing to work to pay taxes, mm-hmm. but if we understand that our taxes are not staying in the country and paying for what we think our taxes ought to go for, but are just simply going to the banks. And why should the banks be paid this money? Because the currency is printed by them out of thin air. It's entered as a digital entry on a computer screen, and they get to keep that money as if it had been issued by them with some value. But sure. They're just manufacturing it out of thin air, and they're keeping the difference between what it cost them to print and the face value of the money. That's called seigniorage. And any president that tried to keep the seigniorage with the American public, in other words, have the Treasury issue the currency, not a private bank, they were murdered. That's what happened to Lincoln. That's what happened to John F. Kennedy. 10 days after Kennedy signed something called the Green-Hilton Agreement. And let's look at the Green-Hilton Agreement. What was that agreement? There is a trust fund that contains the world's gold monetary reserves. It's called the Global Debt Facility. And when the World Bank and the IMF were created in 1944, the secret reason for them to be created was so after 50 years, the gold was put in a trust fund, a secret trust fund, and it was kept there for 50 years in secrecy. And at the end of the 50 years, the World Bank and the IMF were supposed to decide how that was going to benefit humanity, because that trust fund is for the benefit of humanity. And so it's administered by the World Bank and the IMF. And I found out about this global debt facility. I was in the World Bank for 20 years as their lawyer, and I saw that the World Bank was doing crooked things. And I knew it was my job as the lawyer inside the World Bank to stop that corruption. And I also knew, because of this power transition model, that if the corruption did not end, we were going to have a nuclear war in the Middle East. And the likelihood was 90 to 95%. And so when I got my statement about the corruption in the World Bank up on the UK Parliament website, and I got 3 statements up there, and my last statement, another whistleblower named Elaine Colville from Scotland also got her statement up. Once that happened, the power transition model predicted that we were going to clean up the corruption. And at the beginning, when I started all of this, I thought I was just talking about corruption inside the World Bank. I was not going to start trying to end world corruption as a lawyer by myself. I would never have started on that. But I did know that as a lawyer inside the World Bank, it was my job, it was my duty to end the corruption inside the World Bank. And I also knew from Jacek Kugler that it was something that could be done. And I also knew that if I didn't do it, there was going to be a nuclear war in the Middle East. And actually, that nuclear war nearly happened. That was Syria. But you can see that we have been actually succeeding in rolling back the banking cartel. So that war didn't happen in Syria. The war didn't happen in Ukraine. And there was a threat of a nuclear bomb being dropped on Charleston. That was on October 7th, 2013. Now that's where you see that the U.S. military is actually loyal to the citizens and not loyal to the banks. So that's what's going on. And we just actually, within this past month, we nearly had a nuclear war with Russia. When Chuck Hagel left as Secretary of Defense, he put in an extra layer of approval for a nuke being utilized by the U.S. military. And I'm trying to remember the name of, I think it's Christine, and I've forgotten her last name. It begins with an H. She has been arrested for refusing to authorize a nuke dropped on Russia.
Wow. Do you get the feeling that the development of nuclear weapons is essentially for the bank to be able to have leverage, always leverage fear against citizens? I get the feeling that they're not too happy with Vladimir Putin in Russia, and that unrest that always seems to be percolating in that country might have something to do with that too.
Well, I'll tell you why the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima in Japan.
Okay.
It's because Japan was refusing to tell the bankers where their gold was. What happened in World War II was Jose Rizal, who had been in charge of this gold for the Vatican, took the gold that the bankers thought was theirs, and he shipped it to Singapore. He had it melted down, and he had it stamped, and he put it in this trust, the Global Debt Facility, for the benefit of humanity. And then the Japanese refused to tell the bankers where they had put this gold that had been re-stamped. And that's why they dropped the bomb on Hiroshima.
And so my next question is, to get us to do that in Hiroshima, what was Pearl Harbor then?
Pearl Harbor was to get the United States into the war. That was a false flag. That's what it was.
That was a total false flag.
Yes.
So that what we were told was, again, this is hogwash, what we were told of, essentially the attack was allowed. Them attacking Pearl Harbor was part of a greater plan to get us involved in the war. And in this case, we, bombed Nagasaki and Hiroshima. What you're saying is because they didn't turn over the gold.
Let's fast forward now. Japan doesn't have its own military to defend itself. What they have instead is they have the United States troops on Okinawa, and those troops are governed by something called the Joint U.S.-Japan Committee under the Status of Forces Agreement. And I went to Japan last summer, and the Japanese do not want the U.S. military to surrender unilaterally, which is what is going to happen if we don't get rid of the Federal Reserve note. They have been this quantitative easing that we're told is done to try to strengthen the United States economy. That's actually done so that there'll be a unilateral surrender of military might by the United States, because The Federal Reserve note as paper, when you keep printing more and more of it, it becomes valueless.
Right.
And they're trying to have the United States surrender unilaterally. Now, I asked General Martin Dempsey, he's the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, why we didn't accept the gold that the Global Debt Facility has offered the United States and use that to mint dollars out of the gold, which wouldn't crash. Why would he not accept that if his job is to defend the United States? And he refused to answer the question. I asked him that question twice. This is because he's not really working in defense of the United States. He's working as a Knight of Malta to try to unilaterally surrender the United States. Right. So Chuck Hagel was actually going to court-martial Martin Dempsey, and that's why he had to step down as the Secretary of Defense.
So we have all this gold out there that was meant for the benefit of humanity, tons and tons and billions, and the IMF and the World Bank is trying to figure out what to do with it.
Well, no, we've already figured it out. We've already agreed. We've already agreed that this gold is going to each and every country so they can mint their currency. It's not a one world order. It's not a single currency for the world.
Okay.
What it is each and every country will have its own currency, but they will mint it out of the gold.
I see. We never should have gotten away from that. You know, when people talk about Richard Nixon, they always talk about Watergate. The worst thing he did was getting us off the gold standard, and why he did that. Why did he do that?
He did that because there wasn't enough gold to go around. We had too many dollars and too little gold.
Wow. Wow. That's so this reset, is this reset going to happen?
Yes, the likelihood that it happens is 90 to 95%. What I've done is I have written to each and every country and back in July and offered them the gold that they needed to mint their currencies out of the gold. And then what I did there was a spring meeting of the World Bank and IMF on April 17th through 19th. And just before that, we had something called a notarial protest, which is I wrote to the Federal Reserve and also the U.S. Treasury, and I said, the gold that you're claiming is in the monetary reserves of the United States is actually held by the Global Debt Facility. You're lying. And I asked them to respond. They refused to respond a number of times, and then I copied all of I copied the U.S. Postmaster General, and then I copied the Universal Postal Union Director General of the International Bureau. And after that, I then filed financing statements against each of the 12 Federal Reserve banks, because what they did in the 1930s was they gathered up gold from the elites, and they issued certificates denominated in gold. At the time, it was over $200 trillion, and that's been accruing interest, and the interest has been compounding. So now the Federal Reserve owes over $2 quadrillion denominated in gold in these bonds. And so all of the country debt is less than that. We can offset the U.S. debt,
right,
Ireland's debt, Greece's debt. We can just say that the money that we owe under our debt is offset against the money that the Federal Reserve owes the Global Debt Facility. And so I put the Bank for International Settlement and the 60 central banks into receivership in the Global Debt Facility during the spring meetings in April. And that's where they are. And I've been discussing this now with the Secretary of State in some of the states where they have raised questions about the UCC statements, the financing statements that I filed. So in Illinois, which is where the Chicago Federal Reserve Bank is located, I got a letter saying that they wanted me to prove that the Global Debt Facility had the right to file these financing statements. And so what I did was I looked at that law, and the law said that for a bank which is regulated in the U.S., there's no requirement to prove anything. And the World Bank is actually regulated by something called the National Advisory Council on International Monetary and Financial Policies. That's chaired by the Secretary of the Treasury. It's got the chairman of the Federal Reserve on it. It's got the Secretary of State. It's got the chairman of the SEC on it. Anyway, so I said I was exempt. And then, but I also showed where the Fed had been trying to buy up the quadrillions in bonds that they owe. They actually tried to buy those back on a discount. So anyway, I cleared that letter with the Board of Governors. That's over 180 ministers of finance and ministers of development that are in charge of running the World Bank and the IMF. And I cleared that letter with them.
You know, it's funny, we talk a lot, we've already talked about bank cards and things, hidden things coming to light. So essentially what you're saying is that the global reset that you're talking about is the minting of this gold to these countries that was kept aside for humanity. And then out of the gold, let's say that the United States have, we would have a currency that would be minted or derived from that bundle of gold. There are people out there that talk about a global reset, that all of the world's fiat currencies would be revalued. And there are a lot of people out there that have invested in these fiat currencies. What would you say to those people?
Well, the first thing they would have to do is they would have to look at what the BRICS are saying. That's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. These countries, they have 25% of world trade among themselves. They are refusing to use Federal Reserve notes in that trade. And 133 developing countries in a group called the G77, they're also stating that they're not going to use the dollar as international reserve currency. So the dollar, the Federal Reserve note that is, has lost its status as an international reserve currency. This means that there's a total glut of Federal Reserve notes. Nobody wants these anymore. And so how are you going to have the Federal Reserve note as part of a world basket of currencies, the SDR, which is what the IMF is saying is going to happen with the global reset? People aren't agreeing to that. So you can't have a reset when there's no agreement.
I see. I see. So it's not something that is going to happen overnight. We are still, would you say we're still a ways away, months away, a year away? You don't know.
No, I actually think it's going to happen very soon, Chris.
Oh, you do?
And I'll tell
Okay.
you why I think that. Because, as I said, the United States is under state capture, and we have this interregnum. So when I wrote to all of the secretaries and the ministers of finance, I did not write to Jack Lew, because he's not serving the interest of the United States. He's serving the interest of this group, the Network of Global Corporate Control, which consists of all these companies rolled into one. What I did say was I said that the United States interests are now being served, first of all, by the county executives of America that accepted the gold. Why wouldn't we accept our gold? Of course we would accept our gold, and that's what the county executives of America did. And so I went, just last week, I went to the Mint Council. The president of the Mint Council is Rhonda Sepp, who is a member of the American Federation of Government Employees. And I said that the Mint should accept this gold and mint the dollars, and then we should just exchange the Federal Reserve note for those dollars. And if the AFGE is not accountable and somehow thinks that it's supposed to serve this network of global corporate control, well, we'll just go to a different mint. There's nobody that's going to force us to use the U.S. Mint if they're not going to accept our gold. that we're entitled to.
You know, it's amazing, and sometimes it's a matter of it's a matter of semantics. You know, the Federal Reserve note is one thing. The dollar was a Spanish word, and it was a denomination of silver.
That's right.
You see, we've been totally duped. You think you have a dollar bill. You wish you had a dollar bill because it would be worth something. It would be backed by something. This Federal Reserve note is just a piece of paper with the number 5 on it. And if it's not backed by silver, gold, or oil, it might as well just be backed by Gatorade. It has to get to a point where something has to stop.
Well, many people are confused about what they should do right now as we speak. And one of the things, the quarters, they're not issued by the Federal Reserve. Buy quarters. They're worth something. They'll stay valuable. But there's also something else that people can do. That is that Austria has issued gold now, and the gold, it's a gold bar that can be broken down very easily, that it's meant for that, into 25 pieces of 5 grams of gold each, worth roughly $8. You can buy that, and that's going to serve as your currency until we get this sorted out. I'm optimistic that we'll get it sorted out very readily. I've been in touch with any number of countries that know that there is a coalition for the rule of law, and that the people in the United States are not completely duped by this network of global corporate control that has the mainstream media. There was something that I wanted to show everybody. Actually, it's kind of hard.
Let me hold it up. Let me hold it up, and you point it out. Let me go camera 1 here. All right, go ahead. Just point it out, and let's get a look at it. We have the pyramid at the top. Talk, Karen.
Okay. Well, what this is you have on one leg it says Democrats, and on the other leg it says Republican, and underneath the boot you see an American voter saying, "Ow, next time I'll vote Republican," and the Republican is saying, "Ugh, next time I'll vote Democrat." And at the top, this is the global elite bankers, and their megaphone is the mainstream media, and it's called the March of Tyranny. Now, enough American citizens know that the news that they're getting is just propaganda from the bankers. The bankers have bought up all of the papers. And for example, how many people know about these things that I'm talking about? It's just people that are lucky enough to see your show, Chris, or look at what's going on the internet. But the internet is very, very powerful now. There are a number of people that know that there is going to be a global currency reset, that the world's gold, and it's not just gold, it's precious metals, it's artwork, is in this trust that's intended for human beings, for all of us.
You're on the air with Karen. May I help you?
Yes, I have another question.
Okay.
It's taken me this long to form one because my mind is spinning. You have given excellent information, I think, because my mind is still spinning. You were starting to bring it down to the local level. And let's just say me. How does this affect me when I get up in the morning and I go to bed at night? I'm retired. How is this going to just affect my day-to-day? Just a couple of examples would be fine. I'm just trying to get a grasp, a personal grasp on what I'm hearing.
Oh.
I have 3 pages of notes here. I'm a fast writer. But, you know, it's been fascinating to what I don't know.
Well, here it is.
Haven't even known that I didn't know. I think that made sense.
In short, and I'm just going to speak to this, and then obviously you pay more attention to Karen. In short, anytime you hear the word gold, it has been the currency of the elite forever. The only way you can leverage your resources is to have gold and/or silver, because eventually, if this gold that was left for humanity is given to the countries, then a currency backed by gold is going to be the ticket. So any gold or silver that you hold is going to help you in the resource area. Go ahead, Karen.
Well, the very first thing is I don't want to frighten people, but we have we're at a fork in the road, and one fork is peace and prosperity, and the other fork is a currency war. And currency wars lead to real wars. We're talking about the difference between World War III and prosperity. But right off the bat, when you pay your taxes, that's, for most citizens, that's 3 months out of the year. They're working 3 months out of the year for bankers for no good reason, because the bankers are not entitled to, they're not entitled to print money out of thin air and then by our politicians. But how things will be different, it's going to be the most incredible blossoming, because I've been talking about gold currency, but there's actually a different currency which is much, much more important, and that is local currency. We now have laws that say legal tender is only Federal Reserve note. There's no other legal tender. But if you get rid of that law, which should never be there, you can have local communities issuing their own currency, so that you'll have goods and services in the local area. The merchants, it's like a local barter system, but better. You'll have full employment overnight all over the place.
I just want to thank you, and thank you for letting me hang on here. So just as my last little bit of my question then, as part of my portfolio that I have, it should contain assets of gold and silver.
Well, I'm not an investment advisor. What I do say to people about gold and silver, though, is that when you get it, it's not so much as an investment, but as insurance.
Good. Okay. That explains it to me. I'm going to hang up, but thank you so much.
All righty. Before the hour runs out, we have to talk about a certificate of title and actual title. So I have a car. You pay off a mortgage and someone gives you the title for the house, but that is a certificate of title, not the actual title. What's the difference?
It's warranty of title. The difference is that in the 30s, when the United States was put under bankruptcy, the states all got together and they agreed that they were going to keep the certificates of title for the bankers, and they were going to keep the actual title for the bankers, and they were going to give bogus titles to the citizens. It's not, you don't, when you've paid off your mortgage and you get that certificate, that's not the real title to your house.
So they've held the actual title as collateral?
That's right, for the bankers. And, a lot of this information, people are saying, well, it sounds outlandish, Karen. How can I take your word for it? And I'm actually relying on the research of people who are telling me this. And I can go back and I can show you there was a very detailed research that was done by a man who analyzed, he called this War Powers Act. American citizens are actually, their government considers them to be belligerents. And that's what has given them, they think, the right to take our title from us.
And that means everything. So the 401k that we think we have, the house that we think we own, the car that we think we own, it's a big sham. And it's going to remain a sham until we take it back, correct?
Yes, and fortunately, everybody is all working together to undo this this corruption. It's all corruption. That's why we're getting such. And when I talk about corruption, there's another word for it that was invented by lawyers: gobbledygook.
Right.
the system where you've got these hidden realities, where nothing really is the way it appears. This has been invented by the lawyers. And, you know, I've been talking to the lawyers about this. I've been talking to the president of the American Bar Association about this. I've been putting comments up. They take the comments down. I put them out on Twitter, and it goes viral. People can see the proof of everything that I'm saying. And they're going to have to be accountable to the American public, who are not going to accept this, these lies.
And what's our recourse? We're supposed to have access to our governors. You know, we all live in 50 states. It was meant to be 50 separate countries as far as freedoms goes. Who do we petition? Who should we really be mad at? Who can we call? Our mayor's not going to do it for us. The senators and the congressmen are in the back pocket of these people. God knows the governor would be the same, no?
What I'm recommending for people to do is to form their own individual networks, kind of like a book club, and get together regularly. And don't just sit and open the newspapers and think that you're going to be reading about what's actually happening, because those media outlets are owned by the bankers. You're being fed propaganda. Much of it is probably lies or manipulating you into being frightened. People should actually not be frightened, because what's happened is that people are now realizing what the actual state of affairs are. Maybe it's not pleasant news, but it's better to know what's really going on than to be completely duped. And so if you have these groups, you can then work together to keep up to date with what's actually going on. And what's actually going on, as I said, is that we do have this gold at our disposal, and we are going to be minting our currency out of it, and we're going to be exchanging the Federal Reserve note, which is worthless, for this valuable golden currency. And the chances that we do this are 90 to 95%.
Before we get off tonight, you and I talked about this. There are a lot of folks out there that have been investing in foreign currency, the dinar, the situation in Vietnam. Was it the dong is a situation, yes. And whatnot. What are the dangers of that kind of activity?
Well, the group that's deciding how the currency reset is going to be occurring, that's the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF. But we're not likely to have valuable gold currency given to speculators who are trying to make a fast buck. And so most of these people have bought these dinars and dongs for pennies as speculation, thinking that they're going to get rich quick. Well, I would go back to the people that have sold these things to you, and I would demand my money back, because the likelihood that you're going to get rich quick with this speculation is very, very unlikely.
Has this ever happened in history, where people have bought currency for speculation and they have become rich? Has anything like that ever occurred in history?
What we're doing right now has never happened in history. It's a magnificent endeavor, and the likelihood that we pull it off is, as I said, 90 to 95%. And the reason that I'm so optimistic is every day when I go and open my emails, I see how many people are working on this and how we're all contributing to this. It's teamwork, the likes of which you've never contemplated. It's so exciting. And so I think that we're going to manage to do this, but it's not going to be done in a way that individuals are going to be getting rich quick. It's going to be done because we are doing this for our generations to come. We're cleaning up this terrible corruption that we've all been suffering from through our history.
So essentially, from the time that we became a country, the parasites were already here.
Oh, Chris, this goes back
to Europe.
to the Sumerians.
Right. So this is nothing new. They get their tentacles in you, and they make real wealth almost impossible to acquire. But then people like yourself put your football helmet on, and you go into the middle of the line, and you start creating ruckuses, which get people to talk. And think about just the video that you and I did in January. 22,000 people have seen that particular interview, and more have probably seen others. In the next 30 seconds, is that unbelievable? Do you feel your responsibility?
We're in the age of the internet, and we're all responsible.
Yeah. So you don't feel an extra responsibility, an extra burden? I know you're in an area where you could be a target. Does that affect you in any way, shape, or form? Oh,
I've been targeted every which way, and it just helps me the next time I know how to duck better. How
much time we have, Chris? We have about 1 minute. Well, this is another hour that went by so incredibly fast. You can follow her on Facebook. And if you're nice enough, she'll friend you and come up and do your talk show like she's done for mine. I can't, thank you enough. And you know what? I really hope that whatever transition takes place, that it will be peaceful and people can get their resources and food. And you have a lot of courage, to do what you do, because you mentioned before presidents that have gone against the way of thinking of fiat currency have been assassinated. People know why Lincoln was shot. People understood why JFK is shot. There is no mystery to any of this stuff. It's always about money, isn't it? And money leads to control, doesn't it? Is what we can do. Well, that's going to be it for me on April the 28th. I will be back next Tuesday. We'll be here for the next 2 months, same time, 6 o'clock. We'll have different guests with different perspectives on different subjects. This has been a great hour. Good night, everybody.